Christina Siders is 67 years old, and almost nobody is talking about her. That's the thing that keeps pulling at me when I sit down to look at this case from the top. We've covered Gary Sr. and his fall in jail, his competency evaluation, his attorney filing for mental disease defenses. We've covered Elizabeth extensively, her age when she married into this family, her brother breaking his silence, her attorney going on national television, the court filing about wanting to go back to those in her care. We've covered Gary Jr. and the misdemeanor warrant that kicked everything off. Christina Siders, 67 years old, married to Gary Sr. for decades, mother of Gary Jr., grandmother of the 16 individuals removed from the Omer Road property on June 30th, one of the 4 signatories on the 2008 marriage certificate that brought Elizabeth into this family when Elizabeth was 15. And in weeks of coverage across dozens of channels, dozens of news outlets, dozens of legal analysts weighing in on this case, Christina has been almost entirely absent from the conversation. Until now, because Christina Siders' attorney just filed something, and what he filed tells us more about where this case is headed than almost anything else that's happened in the legal proceedings so far. He filed a non-dissemination order. Now, if you're not familiar with that legal term, that's okay. I'm going to explain it carefully, because what it is, and what it implies about this case, is genuinely significant. A non-dissemination order is a court order that restricts what information can be publicly shared or discussed in relation to a legal proceeding. It's used in cases where attorneys believe that the public spread of certain information, through media coverage, social media, or other channels, could prejudice potential jurors, interfere with a fair trial, or in some cases, endanger the defendant or witnesses. Christina's attorney filed this motion before the grand jury has even convened, before indictments have been issued, before a trial date exists. Let me sit with that for a second, because the timing here is the part that's genuinely surprising. Most non-dissemination motions get filed after a case has been in the news for a while, when specific information has already caused demonstrable harm to the defendant's ability to get a fair trial. Filing one at this stage, while the case is still in pre-indictment territory, suggests that Christina's attorney is already worried about something specific, something that's either out there already or that he believes is about to come out. Now, I want to be clear about what I know and what I don't know. The specific content of that non-dissemination filing, what information it's seeking to restrict, what categories of evidence or coverage it's concerned about, hasn't been reported in detail. What's been confirmed is that the motion was filed. What it specifically covers, and whether the court grants it, are things that will play out in the coming days and weeks. But here's the thing about a non-dissemination motion filed this early. It means something is out there that Christina's attorney wants to contain, or that something is coming that he wants to get ahead of. Let me tell you what we know about Christina Siders, because I think putting her in context, who she is in the structure of this family, what role she occupied, what the public record tells us about her specifically, is actually essential to understanding why her attorney's filing matters. Christina Siders is 67 years old. She is the wife of Gary Siders Sr., who is 73. She is the mother of Gary Siders Jr., who is 36. And she signed the marriage certificate in March 2008 when her son Gary Jr., who was 18 at the time, married Elizabeth, who was 15. That detail is important, not because it's the only important thing about Christina, but because it places her as an active participant in the decision that brought Elizabeth into this family. She wasn't a bystander to that marriage. She was a signatory. Her name is on the document. Former Vinton County Prosecutor Payne has noted publicly that the investigation into this case extends beyond what happened on Omer Road. It extends back in time, across multiple counties, across what investigators believe was approximately 18 years of the family existing outside institutional systems. And Christina has been present throughout all of it. She's 67. She and Gary Sr. are the older generation, the grandparents, the people who were there when the family structure was first established, who were there through the moves across Ohio, who were there through every year that this household existed the way it did. She was also confirmed to be receiving state benefits at the time of her arrest. She and Gary Sr. were the ones enrolled in Ohio's assistance programs. Their names were on those government documents, which means that Christina, more than the younger defendants, had an established identity within the state's administrative systems. And yet, she has been almost entirely absent from the public conversation about this case. Why? One possibility is that her attorney has been very deliberately keeping her out of the press. That from the beginning, the legal strategy for Christina has been to maintain the lowest possible profile, to not give interviews, to not generate headlines, to let the coverage focus on Gary Sr.'s competency questions and Elizabeth's victimhood arguments while Christina stays quiet. If that's the strategy, it's been working. But the non-dissemination motion changes things, because a motion filed in court becomes part of the public record. And the fact that an attorney felt it necessary to file a motion seeking to restrict the spread of information about his client before the grand jury, before indictments, is itself information. It tells you there's something to restrict. Let me back up and talk about the broader state of the legal case right now, because several things are moving simultaneously and Christina's filing is happening within a specific legal context that matters. All four defendants, Christina Siders, Gary Siders Sr., Gary Siders Jr., and Elizabeth Siders, waived their preliminary hearings on July 7th. That sent the case directly to a grand jury. No grand jury date has been scheduled. Vinton County Prosecutor William Archer has said grand jury hearings occur every other month and that he hoped to have an update within 2 weeks of his statement. That 2-week window is either already passed or close to it as of the time I'm writing this. Special Prosecutor Kara Keating, a former Franklin County prosecutor, has been appointed. The Ohio Attorney General's office is involved. The Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation has been assisting with what appears to be an investigation that extends across county lines and potentially beyond Ohio. Gary Siders Sr. is undergoing a court-ordered competency evaluation. His attorney, Dorian Baum, is considering a not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect defense. Gary Sr. has been released from jail on a recognizance bond with GPS monitoring because of medical concerns. He fell while in custody, was hospitalized at Ohio Health Obolines Hospital in Athens, and his medical costs were deemed significant enough that Vinton County modified his bond to avoid absorbing them. Gary Siders Jr. has a separate court date scheduled for July 23rd related to the 4 public indecency charges that originally brought deputies to the Omer Road property on June 30th. Elizabeth Siders has filed for bond reduction and has stated, through her attorney Tommy Stolley, that her principal desire is to eventually reunite with those who were removed from the property. Stolley has appeared on national television describing Elizabeth as someone who may herself be a victim. He has also said publicly that his office is still not certain whether Elizabeth qualifies as a victim under the law. And Christina Siders' attorney has filed a non-dissemination motion, 4 defendants, 4 legal strategies, 4 different sets of questions being posed to the court and the public simultaneously. Now let me tell you about something that I think is the most underreported development in this case right now, and it connects directly to why Christina's attorney might be filing a motion to restrict information. There are photographs circulating online of the Omer Road property. Not photographs released by investigators, not photographs from official court documents. Photographs that appear to have been taken from outside the property, possibly through windows, that show interior conditions. Tommy Stolley, Elizabeth's attorney, has already addressed this publicly. He said he went directly to the Vinton County prosecutor to ask whether any photographs or videos had been officially released. The prosecutor confirmed that no photographs or videos had been released by the state at that point. Stolley raised the question of where the circulating images came from and whether they were authentic. The implications of that question are significant, because if photographs of the interior of the property are circulating publicly before any official release, someone obtained them, either during the investigation or after, either from a law enforcement source or from someone else who had access. And the authenticity and chain of custody of those images matters enormously for what happens at trial. If Christina's attorney is aware of specific images or information circulating publicly that could affect the jury pool, that would explain a non-dissemination motion filed at this stage. I want to stay careful here. I don't know the specific content of the motion. I don't know what particular information it seeks to restrict. What I can say is that the filing is unusual in its timing, that it suggests specific concerns about information that's already out there, and that it points to a legal strategy for Christina that's distinct from what we're seeing from the other 3 defendants. Gary Sr. is using a medical incompetency approach. Elizabeth is using a victimhood and context approach. Gary Jr. is largely quiet, with his attorney making minimal public statements. And Christina is asking the court to restrict what gets talked about publicly before the case even reaches a grand jury. Those are 4 very different postures. And the differences between them probably reflect differences in what each attorney believes their client's exposure is, and what defense strategy gives them the best chance. Now, there's something else about Christina that I think deserves careful attention and that I haven't seen examined anywhere in the coverage of this case. She signed those 2008 marriage papers as a parent figure to Gary Jr., and according to West Virginia law at the time, those papers required a judge's signature in addition to parental consent. West Virginia family law attorney Amanda Alexander said publicly that the judge who signed the certificate absolutely could have stopped the marriage. That the law didn't require an investigation, but the court had the authority to conduct one. What she was talking about was the system's failure to ask questions before approving something that, in hindsight, is one thread in a much larger story. But here's the thing I keep coming back to when I think about Christina specifically. She wasn't the system. She wasn't a judge who had authority and didn't use it. She was one of the adults in that family who actively participated in bringing a 15-year-old into a household that, according to the state of Ohio, was not an appropriate environment for the people who lived in it. She signed those papers. Her name is on the marriage certificate. She was present at the beginning of the structure that this case is about, and she's been present through all 18 years of what happened after. That's not nothing. That's the opposite of nothing, which is part of why her attorney's decision to seek a non-dissemination order is so interesting, because there's a lot of material in Christina's history that could shape how a jury sees her. A lot of context that could work against her in ways that information restrictions might be designed to address. I want to be clear. I'm speculating about the motivation behind the motion. I don't know why Christina's attorney filed it. I don't know what specific information he's concerned about. What I know is what the motion itself communicates, that there is information he wants contained, that he's worried about something, that the public conversation about this case is already reaching a point where he felt the need to act before the grand jury even convenes. That says something about the case. I'm just not sure yet exactly what it says. Let me now talk about something that's also new and that connects to the systemic questions this case keeps raising. Former Vinton County Prosecutor Payne said this week that the investigation has extended to Wisconsin, that some of those in the household traveled to Wisconsin at some point before the family arrived in Vinton County, that the full geographic scope of the investigation now includes at least one other state in addition to multiple Ohio counties. The Siders family's documented trail, as investigators have pieced it together, goes back to 2008 in West Virginia, where the marriage took place, and then moves through Gallia County, Ohio, then to Cheshire, also in Gallia County, then to Vinton County, with at least one Wisconsin connection somewhere in the middle of all of that. The 2008 marriage certificate places the start of this family structure in Mason County, West Virginia. The arrests on July 1, 2026 place the end, or at least the legal reckoning, in Vinton County, Ohio. And in between is approximately 18 years of movement and record avoidance that investigators are still working to map. Christina Siders was present for all of it. Wherever the family went, she went. Whatever records were or weren't created, she was part of the household that avoided creating them. That geographic breadth is part of why Payne said the case will likely require assistance from the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation, which has broader resources than a small county prosecutor's office to follow a trail that crosses state lines. And it's part of why a non-dissemination motion filed at this stage might be strategically important. Because if the investigation is pulling threads from multiple states, the information it might surface could be extensive. There's also the question of the unverified retail employee claims that have circulated online. Allegations that the family regularly purchased bulk quantities of vegetable oil and bottled water without other nutritional food items. Those claims have not been confirmed by authorities, but if they're ever confirmed through documented purchase records, they speak to deliberate and sustained decision-making about the household's provisioning, and they speak to exactly the kind of deliberateness that separates knowing neglect from chaotic circumstance. Christina and Gary Sr. were the ones receiving state benefits. They were the senior members of the household. If provisioning decisions were made at a household level, their role in those decisions is something investigators will presumably examine. I keep thinking about what the grand jury is going to hear when it eventually convenes, because the case that will be presented to the grand jury isn't just about what investigators found on June 30th when they arrived at Omer Road to serve a misdemeanor warrant. It's about the 18 years before that, about the pattern, about the movement across counties and states, about the record avoidance, about the 2008 marriage certificate and who signed it, about the system's failure to find this family during all those years, and about what each of the 4 adults knew, did, and didn't do over those 18 years. Christina Siders' role in all of that is something the grand jury will have to evaluate. And if her attorney has filed a non-dissemination motion before the grand jury even meets, he's already thinking about how information that's out there right now could shape how jurors see his client before they're even selected. Those who were removed from the Omer Road property on June 30th are in the care of Ohio's Department of Job and Family Services. They're receiving support. The process of assessment and stable placement is underway. It's long. It's complicated. 16 people of different ages with different needs and histories. But it has started, and it continues. That's the most important thing happening in this case, even when the legal proceedings generate most of the headlines. The grand jury date hasn't been announced. Gary Jr.'s separate hearing is July 23rd. Gary Sr.'s competency evaluation is ongoing. Elizabeth's bond motion is pending. And Christina's attorney has filed a motion to restrict information. 4 defendants, 4 strategies, 1 case, and a question that the courts are going to be working through for months, possibly years. Who knew what? Who did what? And for how long? Christina Siders is 67 years old. She signed those 2008 papers. She was there for 18 years. And now her attorney is asking the court to contain what gets talked about publicly before a grand jury even sees the evidence. That's not the posture of someone whose legal team thinks the information out there helps their client. That's the posture of someone whose legal team thinks there's something to protect against. What that something is, we'll find out when the court decides whether to grant the motion, and when the grand jury eventually convenes and the indictments come. If you want to follow this case as it develops, subscribe to Crime Uncovered. We'll be here for every development. The grand jury, the competency evaluation, the bond hearings, and whatever Christina's attorney was trying to contain. Some of the most important things in a legal case are the things the lawyers try hardest to keep quiet. We're paying attention.